Hello. Today I would like to talk to you a little bit about my very first book called Dirty Money, Memoirs of a Stripper. So I started writing this book around 2012, and I started writing it because I really always wanted to be a writer, always wanted to be an author. I loved reading as a kid, a lot of horror fiction, crime novels, things like that. I was a little nerdy, I guess. Reading was a way to really escape kind of the pressures of middle school and high school. I had a bit of a rough time during those things, and so reading really gave me an escape. But I never really thought I was going to be an author. I certainly never thought I would publish a book. But around 2012, I finally decided that I should start writing my memoirs. I had already been dancing for around 15 years on and off. And of course, when you're a stripper, everybody wants to hear your stories. They want to know why and all that kind of stuff. And I realized that I probably did have enough stories to fill a book. But my main goal was really to put out a different narrative than what I saw in the mainstream media. Like on talk shows, one of the running themes is psychological issues that women that enter stripping come from backgrounds of abuse, drug addiction, all that kind of stuff. And, that wasn't my experience and it wasn't my life. And I got really tired that was the only narrative that I saw. Movies and things like that, Showgirls being one of the worst examples of really portraying stereotypes that are not necessarily consistent or actually accurate in my view. So I decided to say to hell with it and start writing. So Dirty Money, Memoirs of a Stripper, I ended up self-publishing in 2015, but earlier this year in February, it was republished by Weasel Press with a snazzy new cover, and it has been revised and updated. So right now, I would like to read you the chapter 1997, which happens to be the year that I started stripping. As Alanis Morissette was winning awards for her musical temper tantrums, I was scanning the Sunday paper for new opportunities, and there it was. Entertainers wanted for bachelor parties. My looks had improved greatly. I was still pale and freckled, but I was 18 and firm. I seemed to have a stable grip on my self-esteem and was fairly confident. I felt quite comfortable with my own body. I thought, I can totally do this. So I set up the interview and dressed up in my finest slutwear, consisting of sandals from Payless, with 3-inch heels and a blue flowered dress that I had brought the hem up on just to below my ass. I was never able to achieve any sort of tan. Blisters and peeling were the best I could do. I dyed my hair a more vibrant red in the hopes that it would better match my pale coloring, went heavy on the eyeliner, and set off for the interview I hoped would start a new career. It was certainly the start of something, the total and utter destruction of my carefully constructed self-image. I got 3 feet in the door before I was informed that I was too short, too flat-chested, too pale. All of a sudden I was 11 again and dodging rocks. I felt like the scum on the inside of a gas station toilet. I made it to my car before completely losing it. What the hell had I been thinking? I couldn't believe how stupid I was. Matt was so comforting and supportive. He helped me pick up the shattered pieces of my ego, and I was able to pull on my pantyhose and go back to my cubby and headset. Soon, the monotony of the office would start to strangle me again. It was about a month after my first attempt that I found myself holding the wand again. There was one for a topless waitress in a nude strip club. I can waitress, I thought. Well, I can learn to waitress. I mustered up all the courage I had and made an appointment. This time I was slightly better prepared. The lady at the reception desk was much more receptive. She told me I was beautiful and that I would make at least $100 a night. Holy crap, I was going to be rich. I had to do a viewing for the owner of the club, who I would later learn was a prominent member of a local motorcycle club. I had never been to jail, but I'm guessing the viewing was a lot like a strip search. Good thing I wasn't hiding anything. I got naked and he looked me over, and just like that, I was hired. I put my clothes back on and the receptionist started to groom me for the job. I was to take a turn on the stage like the nude dancers, but I only took my top off and would waitress in between stages. I was an employee, so I would receive minimum wage and collect tips. I thoroughly enjoyed telling my supervisor at the call center what I was leaving to do. She gave me a look that would have turned me to stone had I not been so completely pleased with myself. Quitting jobs melodramatically would turn out to be something I was very good at. I had to resist the urge to vomit as I pulled into the parking lot of the strip club. The brightly lit sign read Showgirls. It didn't feel much like a showgirl. It felt more like a little girl who did an incredibly stupid thing. I pulled on my thong, which had crept farther up my butt than I believed the designer had intended, and walked up to the front door. The meathead at the door asked me who I was, and I let him know that I was the new topless waitress. He lifted the fake velvet rope, and I stepped into the darkened club. Immediately to my left stood the DJ booth, where the one and only Jeff Keith, lead singer of Tesla, was prompting young and some not-so-young women to take their clothes off. For a moment, my anxiety was replaced with excitement. He was skinny and he talked and moved really fast. I was thrilled. I heard him say on a Behind the Music that this was one of the worst times in his life and career. Well, it was pretty cool for me. He gave me his autograph on one of the paper coasters they had and tried his best to ease my stage fright. I was assigned to an older waitress named Shirley, who was to train me to waitress. As for the stage, I was pretty much on my own. My turn for the stage came closer, and the butterflies in my stomach turned into pissed-off porcupines. Jeff Keith helped me pick out my first song, Pour Some Sugar on Me, by Def Leppard. He announced my name, Kelly, and there I went. The only other time that 3.5 minutes lasted so long was waiting for the results of a pregnancy test. I've always had stage fright when singing for chorus in class or making a speech, but somehow this was slightly easier. I've never had a moral problem with nudity, so getting naked in front of people didn't freak me out. Dancing in front of people did. I had an audience that actually wanted to be there, rather than not just being obligated. It was kind of neat. As I stepped onto the stage for the first time, I realized quickly that my ability to dance had nothing to do with keeping my customers' interest. They were just waiting for me to take my clothes off, and I capitalized on that immediately. After an eternity, my song ended and I collected my tips. I'm sure I was awful, but that seemed to have no effect on my money. It was a rush to have all the compliments and the money. I felt like a movie star. I was freaking cool. I was, however, a terrible waitress. I was given an ultimatum about a week later: become a full-time dancer or be fired. Really, I was just being fired. As a dancer, I was an independent contractor and would no longer receive a wage. I would, in fact, have to pay to work there. I would pay a stage fee every night. I was to be on a schedule, and if I missed a day, I would still owe for that day. Pretty awesome deal for the club owner, not so awesome for me. But I was told I would make at least $500 a night. The call center probably wouldn't have me back after my saucy exit, so I signed the contract, and I was officially an exotic dancer. My first time going nude on stage didn't go as well as my first stage ever. I was starting to get the hang of going on stage, but for some reason it didn't occur to me until it was too late that trimming my pubic hair just enough to make sure it didn't come out of my underwear was just not adequate for dancing nude. Why I hadn't noticed the minimal pubes every other dancer was sporting, I don't know. I guess I just overlooked that minor detail. I realized, as I was looking down at my huge bush, glistening under the black light, that this was an important part of showing my genitalia to the public. It took some problem solving to figure out how exactly I had to contort myself in the shower to groom properly. Eventually I was able to get it right. I got the whole shebang, the crack and all. I got down to what is known as a landing strip. It felt weird, but that was the thing to do. Unfortunately, I still had one more lesson to learn about displaying what are normally private parts. In the dressing room, there was one wall completely mirrored, and I would notice that all the dancers would bend over to look at their asses before leaving. Although now it seems obvious why they would do that. I was rather naive, and I found out the hard way. I was already nude as I slid with my back down the pole to the stage floor. I spread my legs spectacularly and noticed something glowing in my crotch region. I looked down and saw little white specks. I realized with horror that this must be toilet paper remnants. Black light makes everything white glow like it's lit up, including toilet paper. I quickly closed my legs and tried to finish the stage, trying to hide my embarrassment. It had finally dawned on me what they were doing in the mirror. From that night forward, I've never done a nude stage, topless, without checking out the rear view downtown first. The next skill I needed to master was the lap dance. Table dance. The phrase lap dance was actually illegal. A very detailed list of the rules and correct terms was included in the paperwork I received when signing my dancer's contract. I took to dancing like I took to school and community activism very seriously. I read it thoroughly. I knew what my rights were to the letter. There were a lot of rules to table dancing. My first lap dance was set up by a girl who had taken me under her wing. The customer was white-haired and wrinkled, and he was wearing the gym shorts I would eventually come to avoid. It was awkward for him as well as me. I tried to copy what the other girls were doing and realized that I must have been the only one who had read the contract. Rules apparently were meant to be broken. It seemed that this was a game we played with the managers. They knew that nobody was following the law but would enforce it if they saw it being broken. Grinding was the biggest offense. Grinding means rubbing your ass in a customer's lap. It is the main reason they buy dances to begin with. And in the late 90s, it was frowned upon. It was a game of cat and whore for the staff. I would grind while they looked the other way, and as soon as they turned, I would lift my ass up and hover like I was using a filthy toilet at a bar. My legs got very strong. Now I had to figure out how to master the art of getting dances. This was where all the money was. I approached a table with two men. As with all the tables, it had a candle in the middle of it. I sauntered up with my best come-hither stare and leaned over the table. I heard a crackle and a hiss. My hair was on fire. I slapped my head and the fire went out as quickly as it started. I gave an awkward giggle and tottered away. After showing my butthole to the general public, it was hard to be embarrassed for long. I moved on to the next table and was able to get a dance. I handled getting dances like a business proposition, which is exactly what it is. I provide the customer a small block of time determined by the length of the song playing, in which I would move around on his lap in a sexual manner without allowing him to touch me in any way, and he would give me a predetermined amount of money with additional tip. Pretty straightforward. And I tried to sell dances like I would vacuum cleaners. This was not a very successful method. I watched the other girls make double and triple what I was making. I tried to emulate them, but I just couldn't feign interest in a lot of the men I was trying to sell to. And when I ran across the occasional customer who was attractive, I was awkward and shy as if we were on our first date. I needed to learn the hustle, as the other girls put it. I tried coming up with different ways to approach men. I would look for tables with cigarettes on them. I would ask if I could have one, and then I would sit and smoke it with them. I hadn't really been a committed smoker until I started this habit. I found out it was easier this way to start a conversation. Despite my antisocial tendencies, I found I was a very good conversationalist. I could talk about just about anything. I had taken some advanced classes in boarding school and could carry on an intelligent conversation about everything from politics. I had your back, Slick Willie, although in hindsight he was a bit of a douche, to Plato's allegory of the cave. And I even knew a thing about 70s muscle cars, as long as it was a Camaro. The more I kept talking, the more comfortable I became. I soon learned that most guys just wanted to talk about themselves. With a question or two, I could figure out just how to get them to the couch. Sitting and talking to guys was kind of like taking the long way around. I could spend a lot of time and have a good time, but end up with no money. Sometimes I would get so wrapped up in a conversation that I would forget that I was trying to work them for money, and I needed to pay my rent. Periodically, I would try the short route and just cruise around the room asking for dances. But this seemed less polite, and I needed to find a happy medium between the two methods of hustle. That would be a skill that would take years to master. One advantage to the sitting and talking method was that sometimes that was all they wanted. In addition to saving me from the perils of bad breath and body odor, these guys, mostly older, wanted companionship and an intellectual connection, and not necessarily a sexual one. Typically, they were lonely, going through a hard time, or just generally stressed out. More often than not, I felt like a therapist, trying to listen and offer perspective on their respective situations. I think the anonymity, this is why I write and don't speak, of the strip club functions like a doctor-patient confidentiality rule. and that it could be a safe outlet to vent to. They didn't even know my real name, nor did I need to know theirs. I was completely unbiased and willing to hang out as long as it was profitable. I was also not in a position to judge. Here I am thumbing my nose up at proper society, so who the hell was I to throw stones? Although I was ultimately in it for the money, there were some repeat customers that I genuinely cared for. There were also the customers who just wanted the physical contact. Those were generally the most lucrative and the most likely to wear the dreaded thin running shorts. They would have you dance and dance and dance until your legs would fall off. Felt like they would fall off. I never understood how it could be fun to sit there while I did the same 4 or 5 moves over and over again with a raging boner and not be able to get off. Although it was bad for business, I would always make it clear that I was not going to get anybody off. I would not touch the penis. I had one at home to play with. And yet, I would be dancing for as long as an hour straight sometimes. It was with this type of customer that I would discover the power of eye contact. FYI to any men reading this book, when a dancer is looking deep into your eyes, she is most likely thinking about how much money she can get out of you. Or laundry, or her car payment, or maybe that she left the stove on, but it is almost never thinking about how much she wants to have sex with you. I learned that I could be talking about disemboweling a puppy dog, but as long as I was looking deep in a guy's eyes, I would have his full and undivided attention. It helps if you are all or partially naked, too. I got stages, grooming, and lap dancing down. Now there were the social issues to contend with. I had a few girls who would help me. I was starting to realize that some of these girls were as weird as I thought I was. Turns out I was pretty freaking normal in comparison. There were more drug addicts and alcoholics than I could count, and really, I didn't have to count. I just needed to read the stage list. There were codependents and schizophrenics and anorexics, and people who were just all around maladjusted. So, pretty much like any other job. Certainly not all of them were nutty, but a good portion of the dancers I met had serious issues. Most of the girls were sociable and nice, but the crazy ones are easier to remember. My favorite crazy stripper was a fellow ginger who went by the name of Ember. Ember seemed to have some sort of problem standing still, and her hips swiveled uncontrollably. I first thought she was a tweaker or speed freak, until the day she heard me say that I was tired and offered me a handful of no-dos, not one or two, a whole handful. Unfortunately, I missed the night that she climbed up to the top of the pole and broke the black light with her head. Some were snobby and stuck up. One of these girls was Cassie. She had blonde hair, beautiful face, and perfect body. She was very quiet, and I would always see her smoking her Camel 100s on the first booth by the entrance. Her first stage of the night was always a theme stage. She dressed like a teacher, with her hair up in a bun on top of her head and glasses and straight skirt. She would dance to Hot for Teacher. She was the coolest chick I had ever seen. I was convinced she would come to hate me and eventually throw rocks at me. I came to find out that she was raised Catholic, was the youngest of a large family, and had struggled like me in school. I guess I was a terrible judge of character. Soon she was helping me with my style and stage presence. I was still into heavy metal, but the owner of the club thought that music would scare off customers. He didn't realize that as long as we were taking our clothes off, we could have been dancing to Cannibal Corpse. I was stuck with endless songs by Eagles and Journey. Motley Crue was about the hardest we could get. Once again, I found myself at odds with authority, and I pushed the boundaries as much as I could. I soon found that the more I tipped the DJ, the more flexible the boundaries became. I discovered that the songs girls danced to could be a big deal. Sometimes, when I requested a song, the DJ would tell me I couldn't dance to it because it was another girl's song. I guess the other girls would get really mad at the DJ for playing a certain song for another girl that would cause the DJ to lose tips. I once asked a DJ who refused to play a song for me because it belonged to another girl if she had written that song. He said no, but as far as he was concerned, she owned it if she tipped him enough. One night, after completing a dance with a customer, one of the managers asked to speak with me. If you put a gun to my head, I still wouldn't be able to remember his name, but I do remember his face clearly. He looked just like the bitter beer-faced man from the Keystone Light commercials. He sat down on the couch and asked me to show him how I would give a dance. I got close to him, and suddenly he grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me close to him. With noxious breath, he growled, "They can't see you if you're this close." I had been too close, I guess, and this was against the rules. When I pointed out that this was what all the other girls were doing, he simply told me to watch it and walked away. I was horrified. I couldn't understand why I was being picked on. I watched some of the other girls snuggle up and smile at the staff. They never complained about the music selection or pointed out the flaws and contradictions in the contract. I kept my relationship strictly professional and followed the rules. Or at least I never got caught breaking the rules. I never got drunk or did drugs while I was working. What the hell was I doing wrong? It would take a while to figure this out. Over many late night, early morning meals at Caro's or Denny's, Cassie and I became good friends. We had the same dancing philosophy. We liked to drink and party, but never at work. And we didn't do hard drugs. Ecstasy and raves were the things to do, but we weren't into that. We held fast to the idea that we were entertainers and not hookers. Grinding was the worst thing I did, but we were aware that other girls were doing a lot more than us. Our dances were strictly anticlimactic. That is, we sold blue balls. We didn't see the need for customers to get off. If they did, they would just stop buying dances. And if you could keep them thinking that they might, you could bleed them dry. Other girls did not see the logic in this and would just charge more to give the guy what they wanted and move on. We called those girls dirty dancers. I was still with Matt at this time. Our relationship did not suffer. We had no jealousy between us. He was still working at McDonald's, but had been promoted to manager. He was quite happy with my new stripper friends that would come over. We had moved into a much better apartment in a better part of town. We were able to take weekend trips and buy new furniture. Despite my conflicts with the managers, I was enjoying my independence. I especially enjoyed telling mainstream people that I was now a stripper. I loved the shock and disapproval on their faces. I loved being able to shock people. I reveled in the attention, both good and bad. People often say that women who go into the adult entertainment industry are being exploited, but I didn't feel exploited. In fact, I felt like I was exploiting the men who would give me money for what was essentially nothing. No one forced me to do anything. If someone offended me, I just walked away. Or if it was serious enough, I could have them thrown out of the club. I was taking advantage of the men that came in there. I felt empowered. I hear people talk about strippers not having any self-respect. I happen to disagree with that blanket statement. I did respect myself. I realized that it took an incredible amount of courage to get up on stage completely exposed. It took a huge effort on my part. No one made me do it. I didn't do it to prove anything to anyone but myself. And I was really proud of myself. I also didn't feel disrespected by anyone else. I had made the choice to be there. I put myself in a position to be judged aesthetically, and I understood what that might entail. I was there to be objectified, and I was damned happy that I was attracted enough to be in that position. I didn't feel demeaned or put down. Quite the opposite. I felt liberated. I finally felt good enough, and I had the freedom to walk away should anyone try to piss on my parade. I was smart enough to know that I was a little minnow swimming in a pool of sharks. I knew that there were predators that preyed on the weak. That was one of the reasons I didn't drink or smoke pot before I worked. I knew it was important for me to be in control at all times. I also believed that if I needed to be drunk or high or to get naked on stage, then I shouldn't be doing it at all. I knew that I had to be able to do this sober if I wanted to be successful. I saw girls drunk or high being taken advantage of. Not satisfied with the intention from the customers, they would get closely involved with staff or owners, looking for further validation, while I, on the other hand, was very suspicious of anyone at the club, and I knew deep down that if I wanted to avoid the pitfalls of this industry, that I was going to have to be very wary of anyone promising anything. For this reason, I tried to keep almost everyone at arm's length. Except Cassie. Cassie was very different from all the other dancers. She was genuine and it was honest. She also had enough common sense to avoid the womanizers and con artists. It wasn't long before we were best friends. Cassie's family had a cabin at Lake Tahoe near Reno, Nevada, and she suggested that we try dancing in the biggest little city in the world. 3 other girls wanted to come with us. One of them was Tina, my friend from high school. I had helped her get started dancing, something I would come to regret. There was also a tall blonde named Kara and a brunette who went by the name Blue. On the way up there, about 1.5-hour drive, we flashed truck drivers in preparation of our new endeavor. We went to the most upscale club in Reno, if there is such a thing, called the Gentleman's Club. The Gentleman's Club made our club in Sacramento look like a major dump. The seats were all plush and the tables had actual cloths on them. We were all hired. We had to get business licenses and sheriff's cards. The business license was pretty straightforward and easy. The sheriff's card was a little more complicated. We had to go to the police station to be fingerprinted. We also had to have evening gowns, well, slutty evening gowns. After we got our paperwork finished, we headed to the local stripper store. I picked out a royal blue lace gown covered in rhinestones. It was absolutely hideous. That night, we drove there, nervous and giggling. Our first night went awesome. We made plenty of money, and we could play whatever music we wanted. It was the first time I was able to dance to Pantera. This was also the first time I encountered any real animosity from other entertainers. Their names were Naughty and Nice, and they were a team and were approximately 80 to 100 years old. Naughty was a blonde with fake boobs and a tan like a saddlebag. Nice, a total misnomer, was the brunette, also with fake boobs and an apparent desire to die of skin cancer. They were the top girls of the club. Cassie caught their collective eye first. She was hard to overlook with her looks and charming demeanor. Naughty would purposely knock into her with the intention of being intimidating. They would shoot us dirty looks like we would run screaming, but the joke was on them. I was used to dodging rocks, so dirty looks meant nothing to me. I had thought that their problem was with Cassie, but Nice came over and sat on a nicely dressed gentleman's lap that I was talking to, a clear violation of stripper etiquette. He had placed a $100 bill on the table for me, and Nice picked it up and said, "Is this for me?" He took it out of her hand and gave it to me and said, "No, it's for her." Nice looked as if he had just farted loudly and walked off in a huff. Naughty and Nice were not our friends. Cassie and I just ignored them and went about our business. We started referring to them as Dumb and Dumber. The way we handled this kind of thing was different than other dancers. We had no desire to beat them up or retaliate. We really just wanted to do our own thing and be left alone. We were not accomplished fighters, and we wanted to keep our faces intact. We got back to the cabin, and it was freezing. Tina lit the fire, and we all made our beds in the main room because the bedrooms were a little creepy. Well, a lot creepy. And that feeling was made worse as Cassie kept telling us the cabin was haunted. I was still only 18 and slept on the floor without fear of the pain that would cause me if I tried that today. Sometime after we'd fallen asleep, I woke up in a panic. As I sat up off the floor, I was enveloped in smoke. I woke up the other girls and we quickly opened all the windows and doors. We had forgotten to open the flue on the wood stove and almost became a news story. 5 strippers perished due to smoke inhalation. Cassie insists to this day that it was the ghost of the lady in white who woke me up to save us. I think I just had to pee, although her version is a little more interesting. So that was one chapter. Basically, when I first started dancing, if you are interested in reading the whole thing, it is available for print, digital, and audible, and I will put the links in the descriptions. Thank you.